Hi, and welcome to another episode. I'm Christine. Thanks for being here. I have a good topic for us today about anxiety. And I feel like this is just a topic that people are talking about in general, especially when it comes to kids. Kids today are very, very anxious. I was watching something and there was like this psychologist actually talking about how, like, I guess back in his generation. So he's probably in his like 70s, I would say. But like there was really none of this, like children being anxious and being put on antidepressants and all of these issues that we see today kids having just completely did not exist at all in the past. These are all new age problems that have been cropping up. And I would say, these issues with eating, I have followed in general that trend as well, um, where there's just like more of these issues. And the tie to anxiety and the fear of eating too is really, they're all very interconnected. Um, so I'm going to talk about that connection today. Some things that you can look out for, um, you know, signs that it might be affecting your child's eating, some things that you can start doing today to start to reverse that trend for your child. And yeah, so we're gonna dive in because it's like it's crazy to think like kids being depressed, being anxious. It's like about what, right? But it is happening and it is very real. Okay, so is it the food that's the problem or the fear that's the problem? Sometimes when kids are very picky or selective, it's easy to just assume that they just don't like a lot of foods, but that's not always the truth, right? For many kids, it's not really about the taste, it's about this idea of feeling safe with the food. You're gonna be like, "What could that even possibly mean?" Um, and if you're new to my work, right, that's probably what you're thinking. What do you mean feel safe with food? Like, it's not a person, it's not like a scary movie. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, there's nothing to be scared of, right? But they are uh, this connection between food and feeling safe is pretty well documented, right? So when you're feeling safe about anything, when you're feeling comfortable and safe, you are more likely to learn and explore and be curious. And when you go into fight or flight, when you are scared, anxious, um, your brain sort of shuts down that part of where you're going to be learning. Like you're not interested in taking in new information. You're not interested in trying new things, right? That happens from this sense of safety in most cases. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people can move past that fear, but it really depends on the person's personality. It really depends on what's motivating them to move past that fear, right? So that's where like a lot of people, the bribes will come in because it's like, okay, they're afraid, but I know that they really like the iPad. So I am going to get them to eat this by giving them the iPad after, right? So, okay, you're going to try this food, but then you're going to get this iPad. So is it like, do they just want that end result? And they're overriding their everything that's telling them not to do it just to get that end result. And I'll tell you when that is the case, a lot of times they're not really learning about the food. They are suppressing a lot of that learning because they're in that fear, fight or flight. So learning doesn't happen. They might move through the action of taking the bite, swallowing it, doing the thing. But the chances of them like the next day being like, "Hey, mom, what about that stuff that you made me try yesterday?" the chances of that happening, I don't think I've ever heard of a case where that actually happened. I'm sure it has somewhere. But the types of eaters that we get that are really anxious and fearful, that's not honestly what's happening. Because like I said, they're suppressing that part of them that's telling them not to do it, just to like get through the action so they can get that thing that they want from the bribe, right? So how does anxiety show up in eating, right? Avoiding new foods. New things might be scary. It might just be new foods are scary. It might not be new things. It might just be new foods are scary. Okay. Why new foods are scary? Different story, but that might be why. To just avoid it because new foods are scary. That is in their mind, that is their mantra, right? That's how they see themselves interacting with food. New foods are scary, right? Some kids need total control because control brings feelings of safety. And you as an adult probably already know this, right? A lot of times, right, that's what they call like a type A personality. They like to control things. They like to have their lists. They like to make sure everything's in order. Maybe you're not a type A, but still, people like routines. People like knowing expectations. And it's all because it brings feelings of control. And the more perceived control you have, the safer you feel. So kids like control over what's on their plate. And think about how many things in their life they have control over. They usually don't have control over their schedule. They usually don't have control over even the people that they interact with, right? It's the people in their house or the people the babysitter that you give them to, or the daycare or the school, right? There's no control over, well, I'd rather spend my time with this person, so I'm just not going to go to school today. Like, no, that doesn't happen. So they really don't have a ton of control, right? Their bedtime set by you. What they do have is control over what goes in their mouth, right? So a lot of times to feel safe, they're like, let me try to get as much control as I can because then I will feel safe, right? So it's not always about behavioral, like, well, I want control because I want to be in charge. Sometimes kids who are oppositional and defiant can lean in that direction, but a lot of times it really comes back to, do I feel safe? Okay. Meltdowns and shutdowns, when there's routine changes or something unexpected happens. Okay, so something unexpected might happen with food if there's maybe even within the same packaged food, sometimes they change an ingredient or the package look changes, right? That happens and it could be out of your control. Sometimes the sauce might touch a different food. Then they've lost control again, right? The control is things are separated. Nothing is touching. That's how I eat my food. So that can result in an increase in anxiety too. Any freezing, gagging, hesitation at the idea of trying something new. These things are maybe something you can think about. You might not have considered how instances like this could affect your child when it comes to food. But definitely, we do see this a lot, so eating is a very sensory experience, meaning it involves all of the senses in your body. It even involves, believe it or not, all the organs in your body as well, muscles. That's a topic for a different day, but it does involve a lot, but it is very sensory experience. And it's a very emotional experience, which you don't think about, especially if you're like a speed eater where there's like no emotion. It's just like, get the food into my body, move on to the next thing. But especially for our kids, it is a very emotional experience. That fight or flight feeling, if that's always happening at the table, they might come to dread the table or come to dread that chair that they are in, or come to dread when that caregiver shows up at the table, right? Because it elicits this emotional response in them, that fight or flight of, this is not good. I am not safe here. I'm not happy here. Things are not going well, right? This is like kind of even at a subconscious level what can run through their mind. Right? So if the brain perceives any experience, small or large, and trust me, I'm sure a lot of these are very seemingly small experiences, but if it perceives it as a threat, it's going to trigger a fight or flight response. And the thing is, you aren't in control of what your child perceives as a threat. Obviously, you creating a beautiful, loving meal, carefully cutting it into the most perfect pieces possible with on their favorite plate, you would think, oh my gosh, what kind of a threat could this possibly be? They are perfectly safe. They're in their house. I'm giving them kisses. I'm giving them what they want. But we're not in charge of what their brain perceives as a threat, unfortunately. And if we were, we probably wouldn't be talking. There wouldn't be an issue here, because I can guarantee you there's no parent who is in this boat with you that's like, well, yeah, I mean, they think that this is a threat because, I'm usually screaming at them and I'm usually throwing the food at their face as they're, no one's doing that. So no one's like coming into this thinking like, I'm setting my child up in a threatening environment, but it's just how the smallest, tiniest thing that their brain can like latch onto that seems so insignificant and ridiculous, quite frankly, to us. Um, I just, I just want to, a quick aside. I was at uh, a business coaching conference recently, and someone brought up this story that just so perfectly sums up how wild kids' brains and imaginations can be and how they can turn something so harmless and simple into something completely ridiculous and different. And I'm sure you're obviously all moms and dads. I probably don't have to explain this, but um, this child apparently thought that the mom didn't love him anymore. Um, And I guess what the psychologist, what she was saying was what they uncovered was that when the mom was pregnant, the mom like, just kind of like pushed the child, not pushed, but like slid the child, just off of her lap because it was like encroaching on the belly space and it was like uncomfortable. So she just like moved him. And from that moment on, the child in his mind thought that the mom loved the baby more than him. And like the mom was like, what? Like, what? How is that even possible that he came up with this like concocted idea? But again, we are unfortunately not in charge of what they perceive as a threat. So interesting though, right? It makes us laugh because we're like, that's obviously ridiculous, but it doesn't matter how ridiculous we think it is. It only matters if what their brain, has turned it into. So, anyways, a nervous system stuck in fight or flight, they cannot focus on being curious, on trying new things, and a lot of times even feeling hungry. Right? Fight or flight is that I am either going to fight you or I'm going to run away from you. That's that feeling. That's that innate human instinct to flee or fight an attacker. Okay. And it happens, um, any time of the day. Like there's no jungle tigers chasing humans anymore, but our brain still perceives a level of danger. Right. And when you're fighting somebody or running away, your hunger is completely suppressed. So a lot of times our kids don't even get hunger cues or feel hungry. We hear that a lot. Okay, so if you have no idea, is my child a fearful eater? Are they just stuck in a bit of a rut? Head over to the pickyeaterstest.com, find out what type of eater they are, and then from there, we give you some clear steps about how to help them make real progress and what comes next. Okay. So if you haven't done that yet, please head over there and do that. But some signs anxiety might be affecting your child's eating. They have a very specific list of safe foods. And a lot of times those safe foods come with very specific packages or very specific rules, or it has to be cut a very certain way. That all ties into the control and the feeling of safety. Okay, they might completely freak out with new foods, not always, but they may. This could be crying, melting down, screaming, throwing, gagging at the sight of new foods. Anything that is what I would consider like a very emotional response to food. They might not. They might just say, "Nah, I'm not going to do that today." That's a better response than the highly emotional one for sure. Getting upset if food touches other foods on the plate, but again, not just like, oh, I'm annoyed. Like it could be a complete meltdown. Could be like game over. You know, that would be like another sign that they're very anxious when it comes to food. They might also have a history of anxiety in other areas. A lot of times, kids who are really anxious about food, there's probably more than one area that this anxiety might crop up in, but not always. Sometimes it is very much just specific to food. But it might have appeared in things like separation anxiety or, reluctance to try new activities or, things like that. Also, there is a sensory component here as well. With the anxiety, they might be like super hyper aware of things like smells and textures, different sounds at the mealtime. And if that bothers them, that will definitely pique their anxiety for sure. Okay, so what are you going to do about it? If you're like, yes, checking things off, these are all things that my child has had happen. What can we do? Okay, my first tip for you is going to be to create predictability and routine. This is one of the things we do and talk about in unlocking mealtimes in the fearful section because it's so important, because structure builds safety, right? Let your child know what food, when it will be served. If they're not very verbal, you can use a visual schedule. You want to, make them feel as if this routine, if you don't have a predictable routine, you want them to feel like you're getting into a routine and the same types of things happen in the same order every time. Okay. So, and that should be in general from meal to meal as well. So it shouldn't just be at dinner time. Like if you're going to feed them dinner, breakfast, and snack every day, and the other meals are maybe someplace else. And I can guarantee that those meals that are happening like at school or at daycare are very structured. So sometimes parents will be like, oh, they try food at school, or they'll do it, they'll eat there, or they'll eat for this person. Think about, are they part of a very structured routine there? And is that a factor at play? Okay. So that's why people love their routines, adults as well. It's a human need to have structure and routine because of that safety you feel. So kids are not going to be any different with this. So if you don't have that in place, think about how to get that into place. And of course, we can help with that. In fact, I do have a chapter about how to make good routines in my book, Mealtime Mindset, if you'd like to check that out. All right, step 2, normalize the small steps. A lot of times parents jump way ahead to eating, to swallowing, and let's take it way down to the very basics, right? Like, just take the pressure off. Like, you don't have to eat it. Okay. You could say things like, well, today you can just look at it. What about looking at it? Right. And if looking at it makes them anxious, we have to go back. It might be, having it in the room is a good start for that. But you want to take it to a point where their anxiety is not peaked, that their fight or flight is not activated by what you're doing. That's where you need to start. Okay. We can change our language around this. Like you're allowed to be curious. You don't have to eat it to be curious about what it is or what it feels like or what it smells like, right? So just giving them that permission to take a baby step. Okay. And exposing kids to food without that expectation does build trust. But a lot of times just exposing it to them when they're super anxious, it's that act alone. A lot of parents think like, or have told me, I've exposed them every day to a million types of foods and like they've never touched it. They've never been interested in it. That's because that act alone isn't going to do anything necessarily. But that in conjunction with other strategies, with changing our words and how we talk about the food, will start to shift their mindset over time. But it's implementing specific strategies and knowing which strategies are probably going to work best for your child, because not every strategy that you see on TikTok or Instagram is going to be applicable for your child. It might even backfire, right? So that's why when we do our roadmap, we try to figure out exactly where to begin and, what types of wording even to use sometimes. Because sometimes with kids, it can get super specific about like, okay, well, we don't want to present it this way. We have to kind of present it this back way, or, it kind of depends a little bit. Got to know your child really well. Okay. And the last one, celebrate emotional wins. You don't always have to celebrate when they take a bite. I would celebrate like any kind of engagement with the food. Like, I love that you smelled it today. That was so great. What a big step. Or, wow, you stayed at the table and it was a little bit tricky, right? Or you let that stay on your plate. That was tricky because that was new and that was different for you. But I'm very proud that you allowed it to stay on your plate today, right? So progress is going to happen through those feelings of emotional safety. So a lot of times when you talk about that, things like that, the bites will come later on, right? But celebrate that win in the moment. I will make one caveat here about oppositional and defiant children. Sometimes this will backfire depending on the personality. You might praise them and they'd be like, I'm out. You thought it was good. I think it's bad, right? So this is why I'm saying you really have to know the child's personality, which is why that's part of our assessment, is we kind of look at their personality, their brain type. Are they going to be the type of person that you tell them they did a great job and they tell you, no, I didn't, and I hate you. So sometimes we have to go about it a different way. So if that's your child, ignore what I just said. But for the majority of kids that are people pleasers, they love praise, they love that acknowledgement, it will help them move along for the most part. Okay. The calmer your child feels, the more curious they will be, because curiosity about food is a natural instinct. What has been suppressed are those natural instincts overlaid with anxiety, fight or flight, right? That scared, negative mindset have been layered like blankets on top of their natural curiosity. When we peel off those layers, that natural curiosity about food can come through and shine. Okay. So when we work with the nervous system, not against it, right? Against the nervous system would be like, you got to finish your plate now. You have to take a bite. if you take a bite, you get this, right? That's against the nervous system. With the nervous system is taking the pressure off, giving them support, changing the wording that you use, right? That is how you're going to create a place where they're going to be excited to learn about food versus I'm eating this because if I don't, I'm going to be in trouble. Or I'm eating this because if I don't, I won't get what I want. It just becomes a battle like of control, like who has the control. And at some point that could completely backfire. Even if it's been working, that technique of the bribing and the pressure can completely backfire. All they need to do is, if they have any realization that they actually do have all the control and they don't have to actually eat anything, a lot of times they will invoke that that right of theirs, because you really can't force them to eat anything, truthfully. I mean, what are you going to do? Like hold their mouth, rip it open, shove food in there, close it up, like keep their, like, how are you really, like, you really can't force people to eat something. So if all of a sudden they have that realization that, oh, wait, she actually can't force me to do anything, the whole thing comes crumbling down. So even if that's been working, you might want to reconsider and doing it this other way. All right. So anxious eaters need more safety, right? That is like the goal of today's lesson. You really need some great tools to shift mindset when it comes to anxiety. Mindset is going to be the biggest, I'd say, reason that your child is going to start to open up and change. Even if there's some other areas that need attention, like oral motor and gut and sensory, mindset with an eater who's super anxious, this is going to be really key to focus on first. So our approach at Foodology is there's no quick fixes, there's no sticker charts. You have to understand the deeper need of what is the struggle and how do we support the child so that we can, like I said, take off all of those layers of the anxiety so that their natural curiosity can come through and rebuild the trust. And step by step, baby step by baby step. So if you're ready to move beyond the cookie cutter advice, our program, the things that we offer are very unique. They're very tailored to your child. We like to give detailed, step-by-step kind of support and guidance to how to get you from this anxious, fearful eater to this curious, excited eater who loves food. And it's not overnight, but it is possible. So if you're ready to join us and you haven't yet, I highly suggest that you go to the pickyeaterstest.com, get the baseline of where your child is at presently. And from there, we give you the next steps, what steps to take next, where to go, what your options are, how we can help. And yeah, I would say just really go from there. You could also learn more on our website, of course, at Foodology Feeding. You know, if you go to foodologyfeedingtherapy.com, it's better. I've been saying foodologyfeeding.com because it's just less words to remember. But for some reason, because the actual, I guess, like legal website is Foodology Feeding Therapy, the just Foodology Feeding one gives you like this weird, like unsafe connection thing. And it's because it's just like it's just like a way, it's like a placeholder website. Like it's just like rerouting you to Foodology Feeding Therapy in the end. But something about it, like, I don't know, on my computer, the cookies perhaps are all messed up. But foodologyfeedingtherapy.com will definitely bring you to our full website, which has lots of resources, more podcast episode, blog posts, videos, things like that you can use to help move your child forward. Whether you choose to get our roadmap or not, we have lots of resources you can use in the meantime to help shift mindset, shift getting this anxiety around food lifted, right? That's our primary goal here. So thanks so much for joining us today. Hope this was helpful, and I will see you next week.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.